recording. So what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Mystical Rebel channel here on YouTube or possibly Patreon. And if you're not on the Patreon, what the heck are you doing? I'm going to need you to join the Patreon. Make sure you like and subscribe, follow, share this with your friends, because today we've got a special guest on the channel. Something that I personally have never heard of in my 23 years of doing occultism. Never did I ever think about magic from Eastern Europe, magic from that area of the world. Never. I always thought of that area as Orthodox Christian. But we have a special guest, someone who is a practitioner of Serbian folk magic, I believe. And we're going to talk about that today. So if you've never heard of it, get out your notebooks because we should be in for a banger. What's going on, man?
Oh, not much. Just, reading stuff. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about my tradition because it's so underrepresented in the Western world.
Of course, of course. Thank you for agreeing to be on the show. Can you pronounce your name for us?
Noćni Vilenjak. It's
Nochni.
it would not yeah, it would basically translate to night elf. It's nothing esoteric. It's just a silly name.
Not a
I go
problem.
by I go by the Apprentice on Discord. I'm not really on any social media, so I use very generic names when I'm interfacing with the public sphere.
Sure, sure. So what would you prefer I call you? The Apprentice or Nochni?
The Apprentice or not, either one,
Okay.
whichever one you want.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. Cool. Excellent. So, yeah, man, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an introduction on you before we dive into, the particulars of your practice.
Okay, so I have been exposed to the folklore of my country since I was a child. My father was a farmer before he moved to the big city, so he passed on some very spooky stories based on real accounts that our family, had, like like various interactions with spirits
Sure.
and so forth. But I was always an atheist. And then, long story short, it was basically this weird pipeline where I got interested in like the Satanic Bible, and from there into occultism, and from there I got into like all the, goofiest, worst possible systems, which were very ineffective, but I take it as like a learning experience. And from there on, uh, through some very strange circumstances, which were absolutely the work of my primary spirit, I ended up meeting practitioners of this tradition who were able to contextualize some of my experiences, but namely the experiences I had with this mysterious being that showed up in my life, as well as various other like things that were cropping up. So these people laid out the foundation for my practice, but ultimately they're not really my mentors in a formal sense.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but they helped me essentially set the groundwork for what I'm doing now, right? And my practice is very much idiosyncratic, but I'm infinitely grateful for their assistance and for the knowledge that they imparted on me.
Okay, great. So it's not a family tradition. This is something you learned from people who are outside of your family.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the thing with Balkan tradition. There are like several ways you can get into it.
Okay.
One way, if you have a witch in your family, you can ask them to teach you, which isn't a guaranteed, way to enter the tradition because they can always deny you. A lot of witches have this kind of tendency to check if the person has what they call a znak or the sign, and they never really define what that is. They leave it vague, and and if you have the sign, they accept you, regardless of whether you're not your family. And if you don't have the sign, tough luck. So that's one way is to like to a family witch. Another way, like I just mentioned, some other witch from outside of your family, if they see that you have a sign, whatever that may be to them, they can accept you as their apprentice, and that basically puts a lot of responsibility on them because they're in charge of teaching you how to interface with various herbs, spirits. You start inheriting their pacts and so forth. You're starting to tap into their magic. Their magic essentially, your magic becomes sort of like an extension of theirs if
Okay.
their spirits approve. of your, of you like being adopted as it were. And there are other ways you can get into the tradition. Like if somebody doesn't have a witch, if they don't know a witch, it's not the end of the world,
Sure.
right? So, very famously, we have tales of Zmayevi, which are dragons, I guess. But like when I
Hmm.
say the word dragon, you're probably gonna think like, the big lizard with four legs and wings that
Right.
burn down villages, and but that's not quite accurate. When we say Zmai, we're typically referring to this group of celestial spirits who are serpentine in form. They're kind of closer to Chinese and Japanese notions of dragons.
Okay.
They're typically benevolent in nature, and there are many tales about them coming down to Earth, like shooting stars and selecting a person that they initiate into, their mysteries. And these unions are almost always, like in every single account, both like in folk tales and in practice, are sexual in nature. So they're very
Wow.
similar to the shamanic spirit spouses that we see across the world. Um, Otherwise, they generally aren't interacted with these groups of spirits. They're kind of like they're very distant and aloof, but when they come down to earth, it's for this purpose. And when these unions happen, they become these sort of like almost like patron gods of a given village, protecting the crops, driving away evil spirits, um, teaching their chosen magic, witchcraft. Basically, very similar to shamanic spirit spouses that we see in different cultures. That's
Okay.
another way. Another way, you have spirits who are simply approach somebody not for any sexual union, but for, just developing a pact because there's some sort of affinity there, and that's something that the person can explore.
Okay.
Um, you know. And if somebody doesn't get approached by a spirit and they don't know a witch, well, it's still not the end of the world because this tradition is very, very flexible. You can, if you uh, if you happen upon a method of like calling upon certain figures from our folklore, which can be through saints or through other means, which
Hmm.
I'll get into later. You can on your own reach out to these spirits and make a pact, and then you know start your journey like that.
Okay.
For example, in Bosnian folk magic, there's this like very popular, almost. I think the Western audience might find this a little corny, but it is a very widespread thing where a would-be witch would go to the crossroads bringing a Quran, and it has to be in the dead of the night, and they would basically stomp on the Quran, uttering various blasphemies and calling out to Iblis,
Ah.
and ask him to initiate them, to accept them, to make a pact with them, and thereby becoming a witch. That's a common method in Bosnian magic. Over here, because we're an Orthodox Christian country, we don't have Iblis as our folk devil,
Sure.
but there is another mysterious figure that we call by various names, titles, never by his true name. Most popularly, we call him Gospodar Vukova, which would translate to the Master of Wolves or the Lord of Wolves.
Oh,
And
okay.
he is very enigmatic figure. So somebody could go to the crossroads and call out to this being, and he is very easy to summon. It's almost comically easy how he like. There's this like popular like saying here, like he hears when you call, and it's very eerie. Like even by talking about him enough, you can like produce certain synchronicities. It's very like people speculate maybe he always has these messengers around, or maybe he's so close to our world. He's this very chthonic being that is reminiscent of our some older Slavic gods like Dashbog and Veles. But that's a whole other rabbit hole that we don't necessarily have to get into this in this conversation. But I can explore that a little bit if you're curious. But anyway, yeah, somebody could reach out to somebody like Gospodar Vukova, somebody could reach out to various other figures, somebody could even reach out to saints, right?
Okay.
Saints are very much worked with in our tradition. And so, like again, there's so many avenues one can take to start their journey in Balkan folk magic.
Interesting. Interesting. And when you were talking about going to the crossroads with the Quran and calling on Iblis to make a deal, That reminds me of American folk magic.
Mhm.
Similar to hoodoo, there's similar rituals, going to the crossroads and bringing a Bible with you. Sometimes you might have to rip the pages out of the Bible. Other times you have to bury the Bible. Other times you just read from the Bible, normally Psalms or Proverbs, and the devil's supposed to come, or another demon who has like the head of a bull, and he's wearing like a long scarlet robe with tassels.
Mhm.
And you make a deal with that being in order to become a witch, or in order to get some sort of a generally impossible thing like $1 billion or worldwide fame or something like that. So very interesting to see the connections. Even though I'm not a perennialist per se, it's interesting to see the various connections from different systems around the world, and see how they might have a common ancestor in some sort of occult tradition. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
so let me ask you this. So prior to you getting involved with Serbian folk magic, Balkan magic, were
Mhm.
you a practitioner of magic at all, or did you go right from? I think you said that you were an atheist, right
Yeah.
into the Balkan stuff.
So, like I kind of hinted at, I went through a very weird sort of like I got into the occult through the Satanic Bible,
Okay.
which is yeah, which the model there is very much psychological.
Yeah.
Rituals are treated as psychodrama, and me being an atheist, that was kind of appealing to me. So I was like, okay, this isn't too far out.
Right.
So from there, I ended up going on the internet, various forums, and I learned about the Goetia, and that then how it goes. Like you start thinking, oh, these are just demonized pagan gods. So I was kind of slowly starting to try to make contact with those spirits. First,
Mm-hmm.
assuming that maybe they're just like, I don't know, some kind of archetypes. I was going off of like some kind of pseudo Jungian outlook on them. But
Sure.
as I was starting to get experiences, I was starting to notice, okay, this is not in my head. This is getting weird because I was starting to have poltergeist activity. Some stuff would manifest, some stuff would manifest but badly. I was doing it very improperly. I was not approaching the Solomonic tradition, the Western Grimoire tradition, as one should. I was very much thinking that these were gods, and you need to like praise them and gaze at the sigil and all this other stuff. So I was, I was experimenting a lot. And then from there, I realized, okay, this works, this doesn't work. So I ended up entering Solomonic tradition. And I was trying to practice that very genuinely. I was using a text that you're very familiar with, which is the Crossed Keys, specifically the Black
Yeah.
Dragon. That
My
was,
favorite.
yeah, that was my go-to grimoire because it just
Nice.
seemed so down to earth and practical. And I was like, okay, if I really want to get into evocation, this is probably the text.
Yeah.
Because Hearts Goetia is just way too, out of my. It's just beyond me,
Yeah.
like with the tool requirements and stuff. I was also like making pentacles and making various like talismans of that sort, both on paper and on metal. I was experimenting with both to see if there's more efficacy behind the material, like
Okay.
so. But I wasn't. I'm gonna be quite honest. I Even though I had some pretty, satisfying results. It's no secret. I could mention one off the top of my head.
Sure.
When I conjured Astaroth from the Black Dragon, I was doing it for the purpose of. So one of my friends at the time, he lost a job position. There was some bullshit at work. Can I cuss on your podcast, by the
Yeah.
way?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so there was some bullshit at work, and he lost his position, and so I was like, okay, this seems like a good opportunity to test out this tech, right? And so I conjured Astaroth because I've read about the spirit that this spirit is capable of granting dignities, among other things. The office of the spirit is kind of scattered throughout the grimoires. Like one text says one thing, the other.
Yeah.
So I was kind of assuming, okay, probably even though this might even though this might not be in the Black Dragon, um, this is probably the office of the spirit. The spirit could probably do this. So I conjured a spirit. There was a very spooky manifestation. It kind of freaked me out. I'll be honest. I nearly ran out of the circle, but I was like,
Wow.
nope, nope, stay in the circle, stay in the circle. It was very, very bizarre. So I did a thing. I requested, for my friend to get his job position, his position in the workplace back. And very shortly after, I think it took like a day or two or something like that, and he didn't get his job position back. He got an even better one. And
Wow.
his boss, yeah, and his boss, who was kind of an asshole to him, all of a sudden started being much more agreeable. Like, it wasn't like brainwashed or anything. My friend didn't notice any, like, the boss wasn't convulsing or crawling up the wall or anything, but he was like very, but he was very much like agreeable and,
Yep.
just kind of not really his usual bitchy self. So I consider that a big plus for a complete, Solomonic noob at the time. Um, but yeah, I didn't really stick with the tradition. It was effective,
Okay.
but like it didn't really feel right.
Right.
Um, but there was this longing for something else, this nebulous longing for another home, as it were, like a
Yep.
spiritual, like another tradition. But I didn't know what I was looking for at the time, and so when my primary spirit, when I started engaging, um, I was I couldn't even figure out what the spirit was, by the way. And the occultists that I was talking to online, they tried their best and they couldn't figure it out either. So, and I was like, okay, I can't figure out what you are. I am not the best medium, so I can't communicate perfectly with you, but guide me towards, further knowledge, this thing that is like most conducive for my path. I framed it so vaguely, right? And in any other circumstance, if you tell something like that to a spirit, you would probably get monkey pawed. I would never dare to say that to a demon. But I always like had a very strong sense that this spirit was, benevolent. Um, so I was like, okay, guide me to. And then miracles started happening. I started meeting practitioners from other systems that you just don't get to meet normally,
Okay.
right? And among those people, there were two particular practitioners. I met one after the other. They were completely independent. Um, Balkan folk witches, and we started talking. And so they were like, "Oh yeah, your spirit, yeah, that's kind of like your instincts are right. This kind of is what we know about." Because
Mm-hmm.
as I was learning about Balkan folk tradition, even before meeting these two, because I was meeting multiple people, right? And one of the people was like hinting at like Balkan folk tradition and blah blah blah, and I was starting to think, is my spirit from that system? But I couldn't really tell because again, my mediumship skills were just atrocious. Um, so when I met the first Balkan witch with whom I became close, this person started to really contextualize some of the stuff that I was experiencing, and then I met another one with whom I became very very close, and this person gave me a reading. This was by far the best medium that I've ever met.
Okay.
This person, like, if I could put a random object in the room, this person would like instantly be able to describe the object and
Oh
stuff. Like,
wow. Okay.
yeah, this person was like on the next level, and it's yeah. So me being doubtful and paranoid, I was immediately convinced. It's like, okay, these people are the real deal. So I had so many questions, and long story short, this person basically told me, okay, yeah, your spirit is like this, and I have to omit the details,
Mm-hmm.
but
That's fine.
the person basically gave me a long reading explaining what the spirit the summary of the spirit's nature, the
Sure.
disposition towards me, the office of the spirit, um, if you can even call it that. It's a very broad sort of thing. It's not really narrow like the Goet, like a spirit from Goetia. But regardless, I had a very, very strong idea now what I'm dealing with, who I'm dealing with. And, I started learning from these two people that I've met. And so they sort of laid the groundwork for me to explore this tradition and really build off of it. I never
Okay.
inherited any acts from them. I didn't want to place that kind of responsibility on them.
Okay.
And but I made sure to always ask them, if I receive something from my spirit or if I do some working, I would ask them for divinations, for guidance. I would ask them for spells, and I would ask them to explain stuff to me. And for which I'm super super grateful for. I don't think I would have. I think they definitely like skyrocketed my journey into this tradition. So I'm super
Awesome.
grateful for that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
No
Um,
problem.
all right. So I think what I'd like to do is build from the ground up. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna start with like your philosophy, your worldview, all that. Then we'll move into like actual rituals, practices, spells, things like that. And then I think I want to talk about some of the challenges that you might see in
Mhm.
that sort of a system versus the world. And then we'll do some deeper exploration from there.
Mhm.
So, starting with foundation. Um, so is there a Serbian folk magical or Balkan witchcraft sort of worldview? Is there like a cosmological framework, or since it's a folk magic, is it something that can be adopted into already existing like tradition or religion, like hoodoo and Christianity?
Mhm.
Is it something like that, or does it have its own worldview?
I would say the only underlying worldview would be animism.
Okay.
From you don't so because Christianity had a huge influence on us.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a belief in a creator God, and
Okay.
there are spells which would utilize God, either in graveyard work or certain other spells. You would in some cases appeal to God, but it's not really necessary because so throughout my research, I have realized that Serbian folk magic is this weird amalgamation of Orthodox Christianity and paganism. So if you look at, for example, Greece, Christianity essentially demolished their paganism. You will not be seeing much of the beings of old, like of old mythology in their folk system. You'll see
Okay.
some that are kind of reminiscent of that, but most of it is just gone. Here, it's sort of blended, where you can have saints which are you have saints here which are like they're treated as both the saint but also this other thing. So, for example, you
Okay.
have Saint Elijah the Thunderer, who is by some in certain villages is viewed as a celestial dragon king, as my Krag,
Okay.
which and some people who are from the villages and start getting into Reconstructionism because ruler like the villages in Serbia, they're not isolated from modern civilization. So some people will start like researching and go to libraries and stuff.
Right.
People who get into Reconstructionism might start connecting Saint Elijah the Thunderer with Perun, right? But
Okay.
that's not what I would consider part of our folk tradition because that's getting into like Rodnoveri stuff, or Staroslavia. But definitely the dragon connection is there. You have a saint called Sveta Petka or Saint Petka. She is syncretized with a folkloric figure here we have that is called Shumska Majka or the Forest Mother,
Okay.
a very dangerous fairy queen-like figure. So you have these odd syncretisms here and there. But to answer your question, ultimately, you don't necessarily have to subscribe to Christianity. The only thing that you should accept, from a practical standpoint, is animism.
Okay.
Th- yeah, in my opinion, at least.
Interesting. Okay. So then that would mean that there aren't any like specific deities or forces or spirits or anything that one would have to venerate or worship or that are even like central to the practice.
Worship is kind of a, I don't know if I would use that term. I mean,
Okay.
there are definitely folkloric figures here who are not saints,
Mm-hmm.
but are sometimes syncretized with saints, as I've mentioned.
Okay.
But you technically don't even have to do that. You would be certainly hindering your practice that way, right? If you choose not to engage with these forces, you can just not engage with them. There are other methods that you could use which rely on herbs, trees, animal parts, graveyard dirt, so on and so forth. It's a very very rich and flexible tradition.
Okay.
So there, it's not really mandatory for you to worship any figures or to accept a particular cosmological view. In my opinion, um, I think it would be much better if you accepted animism and accepted the view that even your mundane objects could be powerful ritual tools if consecrated properly, if awakened properly, if spirits that you work with um, teach you how to use these items, which would otherwise seem prosaic. They teach you how to use them in a very potent manner. So yeah, but like yeah, you don't have to like accept these things, but it would like the spirits and stuff that are from our tradition, but it's something that like really helps your practice, right?
Sure. Sure. Okay, great. And you actually kind of answered the next question I had, which was going to be about the interconnectedness of all things. Since it's a very, um, I guess, animistic practice, as you said, all things would be connected, which is what I was going to get into next. But you kind of already touched on that. So let's move into conceptions within the tradition. Um, Black magic, white magic, right? Is that a thing? Is there a
No.
dark? Is there a light? Is there a one hand in heaven, one hand in hell type of a thing? Or is it just in the hands of the practitioner, like a gun or like a weapon? I might have to blurt that out on YouTube, but uh, what's that dichotomy like? Is there a dichotomy?
Well, people from the city will start saying stuff like Bailey Mag or Tsarni Mag, which would mean white mage or black mage, respectively.
I heard of that.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, but that's goofy. That doesn't really reflect what is that. It's just dualism that has no play. Yeah, there are some dualistic um there is a bit of dualism in some strands of our tradition. There's like Bogomil influence from the 10th century
Sure.
and onward, but that's just so minor and like like when it comes to this question. So whatever dualism exists, it certainly doesn't give you like okay, this type of magic is bad, this type of magic is good. It just simply is. It's also commonly understood that all of the figures within the tradition, including the saints, have a darker manifestation. So
Okay.
remember Sveta Petka that I mentioned?
Yes.
She is, traditionally she is the protector and benefactor of women, a benevolent saint in all regards, but she can also be called on for some really mean curses. And there's some like slightly obscure lore. People in the cities don't usually know this, but some people from the villages do.
Okay.
She can be known for killing children of disobedient women by drowning them into cauldrons or something like that.
Wow. Jeez.
Like you have like these darker aspects of the saints. They're understood to be, you could even argue that there are like chthonic forms of them, which isn't really surprising given that the syncretism between the saints in our tradition and these pagan figures like Shumska Majka, Gospodar Vukova, Trojan, and so forth. So yeah, in short, there is no good magic, bad magic. There's just magic, and all of the figures. Oh, I have to mention this as well.
Sure.
So Archangel Michael is also an important figure here.
Okay.
There's a Slava. Uh, Slava is a saint feast that each household celebrates. So each household has their own saint that they venerate on a particular holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a Slava dedicated to Archangel Michael. He's an important figure here. And there's a title of his which sounds so edgy, and if I swear, if I posted this anywhere online, people would think I'm like bullshitting them. But this is definitely a thing. There's a title of his called Dushevadnik. So
Okay.
Sveti Archangel Mihailo Dushevadnik, Saint Archangel Michael, the Soul Terror. So
Ah.
that,
Okay.
yeah, that alludes to his psychopompic role,
Okay.
and so this title of his can be used to help people pass on peacefully, but it can be also used to take the souls of the wicked.
Okay.
So another hint at benevolent spirits can also be darker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And are you able to see my questions? Because that kind of leads into where I'm going next. You said that Michael. Well, okay. First, let me before I forget. You mentioned a. I think you use it as like a descriptor, as like a term for a certain type of practitioner. I think you said like Cernabog or Chernabog. I'm probably mispronouncing that.
Sunny Mug, Black
Okay.
Mage.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, the Black Mage. I've heard of Cernabog, which is supposedly a deity or a
Hmm.
god.
Yep.
You've heard of this?
Yes, and scholars debate if that deity was even real.
Yes,
So,
that was going to be my question because I used to be part of this group. They're total whack jobs and everything, but I used to be part of
can I
this
guess?
group.
Can I guess what the group is?
Yes, go ahead.
Is it the Mers Orion Cabal?
Yes, yes, that's who
I
they
know
were.
these things, man. I know these things.
The Black Court, yeah, the major, or however you say it, the Majorian Cabal. Yes, oh my God. Back in like 2010, 2012, I was a moderator on Studio Arcanist, which still exists, and people were talking about it. And I was like, what is this group? So I paid the $50, whatever, and joined to see if there was anything there. And there wasn't. It seemed to be a bunch of nonsense. But they had all these gods listed, and Cernabog was one of them, and it just stuck with me. That's
Yeah.
that's crazy that you were able to guess that. Yeah, that's exactly who it
Yeah.
was. That's
I've
wild.
seen all of these wacky systems, everything under the sun. I've probably tried, experimented with.
Yeah,
So I'm very familiar with these things. Yeah.
yeah. It was an interesting time. They were nice people. Some of them were nice people, like the regular members, but it was a weird group and just a money grab. So,
Yeah, I've heard some stuff from there. I mean, it's one of the biggest reasons of mine why I don't like to join any houses or courts or cabals or lodges
yeah,
or even really engage with the occult community as a whole. No offense to anybody, but I some of the motherfuckers out there are pretty crazy. So
I'm the same way.
I thought yeah. So I value my sanity. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'm.
So hmm, sorry.
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So were you gonna ask if Cernabog is in any way relevant to our tradition?
Yes, I was gonna ask if
Mhm.
if he's a deity that is utilized in any way within Balkan witchcraft or Serbian folk magic or anything like that. But if scholars don't really know if he exists, well, I mean that doesn't mean that the people agree. So what say you?
Mhm. No, to my knowledge, he is not a part of our tradition.
Okay.
haven't heard anybody. There have been people online claiming to have some lineage, true Russian witchcraft, which isn't Balkan, but still it is Slavic.
Mm,
Some people have claimed that Cernabog is important in Poland and various Slavic countries, but no, like as far as I know about the Balkan traditions, and frankly Slavic in general, Cernabog is not really part of any traditional system. It's more of a modern thing. So there could be a spirit. This is an important thing. I mean, like look at Lucifer, for example. That name started off as like a mistranslation, as a misinterpretation, but there is a demon answering to that name, and you can use that name to coerce lesser demons.
very true.
Something's answering to that name. So there could be something answering to the name of Cernobog. I will say this much without revealing. I don't want to like intrude upon this person's privacy, but there is a very close friend of mine that I know in real life.
Okay.
He sort of came into contact with a spirit that initially called itself Cernobog, but like there were these little hints in his experiences and in the dreams that he was having in these manifestations, that this might be Cronus or some type of daimon in the service of Cronus, which is
Okay.
taking on these names. I don't
Interesting.
know exactly what's going on there, right? I'm not going to speak for his experience, but he is definitely, and he had results with his spirits. It's not just some random whatever appearing to him. Like he would ask the spirit for something to happen, and it would happen very tangibly and very obviously. So
Wow.
it's a genuine spirit and very helpful. But yeah, anything can answer to that name. So
Very true. All right. Going back before I jumped on that Cernabog train. Going back, you had mentioned Michael in his psychopomp sort of role within Serbian folk magic. is there a strong emphasis on ancestor veneration or a cult of the dead within Serbian folk magic? Is the dead an important spiritual class?
Yes, the dead are very much important. We even have a holiday dedicated to the dead.
Oh
Well,
wow. Okay.
actually, multiple holidays. They're called Zadušnice.
Okay.
There are four of them in the year, and so they are basically these Orthodox holidays, which are essentially just like a appraisal of the dead, but it's not in any. It's not like like you see in ATRs or ADRs. It's very
Okay.
much it's not really on the nose, but the purpose of these holidays is to remember those who have fallen, to honor them, to wish them peace, to
I
help
see.
them, for them to find the light of God, to be at peace, and so on and so forth.
So
And
it's
these,
it's not
oh
like
yeah,
like street celebrations and big party. It's more of a solemn reflection type of a thing.
basically yeah.
Okay.
So one important thing to note though is that our tradition is not monolithic and
Sure.
different. So holidays will be interpreted differently by different households and villages.
Okay.
In the city, it's very bland and it's very just it's whatever. Um, but like in the villages, some people will go an extra mile to honor the dead. Some might not,
Okay.
but yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Fascinating. So you said that there's several holidays. How many are there throughout the year?
Way too many, and I
Oh, wow.
can't
Okay.
tell you. There's just way too many of them.
Oh,
I
wow.
just
Okay.
don't keep.
That
I
is
like,
interesting.
yeah. I don't keep track of all of them. I keep
Sure.
track of those that are conducive to my practice. I'm a very practical person. I try not to.
Mm,
Like it's fun to learn and read about the folklore and the
sure.
tradition and all that. But yet at the end of the day, I'm a practitioner. I do magic. I am very much. I guess maybe it's like a vestigial remnant of my atheistic days where I'm really like experiment oriented. I like have this almost like a pseudo scientific mind. Like I just like to focus on what is demonstrably true, practical, and so
Sure.
on. So yeah.
Fascinating. All right. Let's let's switch gears and talk about some of the practices within Serbian folk magic as much as you can. So what are some of the common foundational practices within Serbian folk magic? Like a general spell, a general ritual, right? This is something that and I know that this isn't what this podcast is about, but when I watch a lot of like conspiracy videos and I debunk them, my number one critique is they don't have any detail, right? It's just they went into the woods and did a ritual. We were wearing robes
Oh
doing a
yeah.
ritual. That's so general. That's so generic.
Yeah.
So as much as you can you get into the nitty gritty of like what a Serbian or Balkan type of ritual or spell would look like?
Yeah, I can. So let's see. There's just so much. Again, it's a very rich tradition. So I'll
Sure.
try to cover as much as possible. If I rattle off and start yapping about something unrelated, feel free to direct me back to the question because I'm super passionate about the tradition. So I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
love
sure.
talking about.
Well,
Yeah.
let's start here. Let's say I wanted to get a promotion at work, and I came
hmm
to you and I was like, I want a promotion at work. How would you begin to formulate a spell or a ritual that either you would have to do or I would have to do?
hmm Okay, so this can go a few ways. First of all, you have to look at what spirit pacts you have in place, which
Okay.
spirits you're close with. Because this tradition, although you have spells that you can just like, plug in and play, basically,
Sure.
for the lack of a better term, but it's the pacts are really what deliver the results. That's just the most important thing, and I would argue that's the most
Agreed.
important thing in in any tradition, the
Agreed.
bond that you
100%.
have with the spirits.
Yes.
So you look at the pacts. So let's assume you have a pact with many different things. You could do a working with the master wolves, whom I mentioned earlier, because the wolf is renowned for his cunning and resourcefulness. So you could do some work there. For example, you could make a talisman. So you would learn from the spear how to create a talisman. It might involve a tooth of a wolf or fur or something like that, right? You would then invite the spirit. You would get a familiar from the master wolves to inhabit the amulet, right?
Nice.
You
Okay.
would you would offer um you would offer strong alcohol, let's say on a full moon,
Okay.
or on or during one of the wolf days. We have wolf holidays, which are between they're between the 16th of November and 24th. Some say between 11th of November and 24th, but
Okay.
generally it's around the Mratinci, which is it's yeah, it's around that holiday dedicated to that saint, Sveti Mrata. But anyway, so you can work with the wolf spirits, you can work with the master wolves, and also this is another thing. The master wolves by scholars is often syncretized with Veles, who is the god of underworld and wealth and stuff. So, and even some practitioners who are diving into Reconstructionism are noticing these connections. Oh, the Master of Wolves isn't just for punishing oath breakers or protecting a home or something. He can also be worked with for wealth magic,
Okay.
right? So, crafting various amulets, getting familiars from him. Um, you know, you can also you can also not necessarily craft an amulet, but permanently seat a familiar into a, let's say, wolf tooth pendant
Yep.
or a wolf skull or something like that. And then you could petition the spirit directly. You offer them a candle, incense, water, stuff like that, alcohol. So that's one way. There's another figure, which is called Trajan or Trojan, who should not be mistaken for the Roman emperor of the same name. This is a this is a Dracula-esque figure.
Oh.
Uh, Very
Okay.
fascinating. It's a devil. It's a
Okay.
devil emperor who is
Wow.
very wrathful, lustful. He is also worked with for wealth magic. He can be so one thing you can do with him is get the horn of a goat.
Mm.
It has to be hollow. You have to yeah. So it has to be hollow completely. Like you have to remove all the stuff if there's anything inside. You have to make sure that the horn is empty, and
Right.
then at night you would collect dirt from specific locations, such as a fort, a crossroads, a bank could do really well. If you, yeah. So you could do if a cave nearby, that's also a good location to get dirt from. You would get dirt from these multiple locations, which are sympathetic to Trajan and his host of spirits, which are Javoli or devils, right? And you would craft an effigy by combining the dirt. You put the dirt inside a horn, and also when you're getting the dirt, there's also a bit of a protocol there. You have to do a little prayer.
Mm.
You have to dedicate the harvesting of the dirt to the spirit himself, right? You're not just randomly like scooping up dirt with your hand or whatever. So you would collect dirt. You can also include certain herbs, and then awaken them. Again, do a prayer with the spirit for the spirit, and you would put that along with the horn, and then you would ask Troyan to send forth one of his javelin to inhabit the horn, right? To awaken the amulet to inhabit the effigy, and then you would seal it with wax, and then every dark moon you would be feeding this horn like strong alcohol, incense, water, and you could petition the spirit directly. So this is one way to do it. Um, there are admittedly not too many like specific money spells because keep in mind this magic is primarily tailored around like it's village magic. So
Yeah.
so the urban context changes things, but it's easy to adapt once you understand certain sympathetic links, right? So amulets, working with the goats, with the devils, which are um they're very chthonic in nature and they're associated with wealth, among other things. Working with them, working with the master wolves, his wolf spirits, that's another thing. You can um you can also petition the dead. If somebody, if you can collect the dirt of somebody who was rich in life, you could then sort of establish a connection. You can even coerce the dead. There's also that kind of practice, commanding the dead. You can also command somebody who was rich in life to become your ally in procuring, various opportunities, or helping you attain more wealth. Another interesting thing that I like is the working with the hedgehog spirit. And this is a bit of an obscure thing.
Okay.
Most people would kind of find the hedgehog an unassuming kind of figure. Like, why would you work with a simple animal spirit, like especially a hedgehog? Well, hedgehogs in our tradition are messengers of the underworld,
Yes.
and they are great for road opening rites.
Ah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So you can make an effigy out of a hedgehog skull, right? You can collect certain dirt, herbs that are, sympathetic with the master wolves, because the hedgehog is his messenger. Um, you can then, once you assemble this sort of, how do you put it, like a this is kind of like effigy pseudo altar in a way. You could then petition the master wolves and the chthonic gods and lords to send forth their hedgehog spirits to, partake in the offerings, to use the skull, the dirt, and the herbs as their sort of earthly manifestation. And from there, you ask them to pave the way for you to obtain more wealth. So these are some of the ways. You can also work with the saints for this. If you're at if you have a specific job, you can work with Ogina Maria, or Saint. I think she's called Saint Mary the Martyr in English. We call her Ogina Maria, but basically you can do a box spell with this saint. You can get a wooden box or a shoe box. You can put herbs and stuff, in that are specific for domination. So stuff like tobacco is really good. You put that, of course, after awakening the herbs and stuff. You would draw a black dragon image on the lid of the box, and this has a connection to a folk tale regarding Oginamari and how she subdued the dragon or the devil. So you could do that, and you get an icon of Oginamaria, and you then do an extensive prayer. Oh yeah, also you should make an effigy of your boss, right? You make an
Okay.
you take clay, you baptize it. You use the verses from Genesis, how God created man from clay.
Yep.
You baptize the effigy. You name it as your boss. You put the effigy inside the box. You then close the box. And you put the box in front of the icon. You light a candle, and you pray to Aginamaria to bind your boss and ensure that he gives you a promotion, or whatever you wish. That's another way to do it. Um, yeah, and then there are also like direct requests from spirits, which are very straightforward without necessarily using any materia. And by the way, a lot of these spells are some of these spells, like the Yogina Maria one. This is something I've learned directly from the person that really helped me when I was really new. So that's not something I arrived at on my own. That's something I picked up from that person. But the other stuff that I've mentioned, like the hedgehog, like the um, with working with the wolf spirits, and the Taiwan one was also the spell that I learned
Right. Okay.
from the person. Yeah.
Awesome. Very well said. Thank you for that. That was fascinating. And what is interesting to me is, again, these seemingly perennial connections. A lot of that is exactly what we would do, in the States in folk magic. Making some sort of a talisman. Over here in hoodoo, we would call it a mojo hand or a mojo bag, which is just a little sachet with materia in it, herbs, roots, minerals and stones, maybe a piece of your hair, or a toenail clipping or something like that. Various
Mhm.
dirts from graveyard, crossroads, a bank, my job, whatever, in order to facilitate that. And also, I really liked when you said about getting a familiar spirit from the master of wolves, getting
Mhm.
a familiar spirit from another spirit. I had a video about a year and a half or so ago on familiars, and it got a lot of people on Witch Talk upset because the first thing I said was that your familiar is not your pet. It's a spirit that you
Oh
get
yeah.
from another spirit, right? There are
Mhm.
cases where you can go and find one on your own, but 9 times out of 10, you get it from another spirit. It's not the dog that you rescued from, an abusive home, which is great and that's wonderful. And it's great that your dog loves to be near you when you're doing magic, but it doesn't make it your familiar. A familiar is a
Mhm.
spirit. And so I'm really glad that you mentioned that without any prompting or anything like that, because it goes to show that not only am I not bullshitting, but this stuff is universal.
Mhm.
And these things aren't just made up, and they're not just being pulled out of our asses. These are things that have stood the test of time, that we can point back to, and that we can not only point back to, but we can repeat. We can do it ourselves. If you don't believe that you get a spirit from another spirit, why don't you go talk to a spirit and you ask them, and then you'll find out, right? So I'm really glad that you touched on that. Um, and it's really cool that there's a lot of similarities between what goes on over in Serbian magic versus what goes on here. Um,
Yeah, yeah. The thing with familiars, so they're very, very important, and it kind of shocks me when I hear people treating like they treat them as pets or whatever. I mean, they are like okay. It's such a. I feel like so. I don't know where to begin because this is such a. I'm sorry, such a stupid opinion. Like, where does it come
Agreed.
from? What? Uh, so
I think it
I
comes
think
from TV, honestly. I think TV shows,
yeah.
movies, your familiar is a cat or a bird or a toad or something like that. It's not like another spirit. It's always, and even if that animal has a spirit in it, that's fine, but it's always this pet that helps the witch out. And it's like that's not how it is. I wish my dog was a familiar, but he's not. He's my dog. So
Yeah, I am not familiar. So just because I'm not familiar with something doesn't mean it's not true, right? The
right,
absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
exactly.
But uh, in my like from my knowledge, I do not know of any single case where the animal, like the living pet, is the familiar.
Same.
People work with animal spirits, sure. I mean, the hedgehog again. The hedgehog is a chthonic messenger of the Master of Wolves, and is also connected with the god Veles, which I don't think
Okay.
that connection is coincidental. And these,
Okay.
even a hedgehog spirit, it's still a wise being that you should treat with respect because this is a messenger of literal chthonic gods,
Yeah.
right? There's a re if these chthonic gods see the value and importance in this little hedgehog dude, maybe you should too. I don't.
Exactly.
So like I think it's silly to look down on familiar spirits, and not all familiar spirits are animals, of course. I mean there are familiars that you can gain, which are the spirits of dead sorcerers and shamans who have
Mm-hmm.
ascended and are turned into, like Vukodlatsi, for example. Vukodlatsi are werewolves, and werewolves in our folklore. Depending on who you ask, if you Google it online, you will usually get, oh, they're just the same as vampires in Slavic folklore and they're hungry dead. But you have a lot of folklore here and in Greece that sorcerers who make a deal with the Master of Wolves would receive an enchanted wolf pelt, which has a wolf spirit in it. And the wolf spirit bonds with the person and they become a werewolf. So
Oh
does
wow.
it happen like that? Does it happen like that in practice? Not necessarily. You're not
Sure,
gonna get
sure.
like a wolf pelt falling from the sky, maybe. But you can bring a wolf pelt to the Master of Wolves to enchant it, and you can then use that for spirit flight and other like shamanic practices. But I'm digressing. So the point is, you have like very, very wise familiar spirits who can be your teachers, your mentors. I
Exactly.
mean, they're also messengers to the great beings that you're pacted with. So disrespecting the familiar is disrespecting the spirit that you made a pact with. I mean, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's one of those occult opinions that I just try to tune out and pretend it doesn't exist.
Agreed. Agreed. I do my best to not be a part of witch talk. I make sure all my hashtags have nothing to do with witch talk or anything like that. And as far as I'm aware, my videos don't come up on witch talk. You just have to be like interested in occultism to see my stuff. But I'm not in the witch talk
Yeah.
hashtags. So yeah, I try to stay away from that sort of stuff. It's
Yeah,
it's wild.
I'm blissfully unaware of what goes on there, and I tend to keep it that way.
Same. All right. You kind of touched on this a little bit, and I guess with the animism thing, um, this is kind of already answered, but I'm wondering if we can go a little deeper.
Mhm.
Are there any specific tools? Are there any specific herbs, objects, locations that one would utilize within your tradition in order to work their magic? I know we talked about the crossroads, we talked about the
Mhm.
graveyards, we talked about herbs and stuff like that. But I know in like my system, right, we've got magic wands, right? We've got pentacles, we've got magic circles, we've got magic rings, we've got scepters and swords and stuff like that. Is there anything like that within your tradition?
Yep.
Okay.
There's a lot. There's a lot actually. So first, the question about locations. So crossroads, graveyard, as we mentioned. Um, churches, funny enough, can be places where you can work your magic.
Same here.
And yeah, and there is a so you can do benevolent type of magic at the church.
Mm.
But then there's like the witchcraft stuff, which is kind of edgy, and it, I will mention it because it is part of the tradition. I don't know how this is going to land to your audience,
Sure.
but there is a witchcraft method where one would go into the church and very subtly, through subtle gestures and subtle, bialitza would roughly translate to incantation in English.
Okay.
So through these subtle gestures, they would try to take the prayers from the people and use those prayers to charge their workings. There's a lot
Ah,
of there's a lot of stealing the luck, stealing prayers, stealing the blessings over here. And
interesting.
yeah, and I'm gonna be upfront with you. I don't have any moral qualms with it. I would do it any time of the day. I don't give a fuck. But I'm
Sure.
I'm I'm an I'm an unhinged practitioner, so somebody might find that distasteful. But I just don't care. I just whatever
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's interesting. We don't have. I mean, I'm sure there are people over here who might do stuff like that, but it's not. At least it's not promoted over here. It's not discussed. A taking away and giving it to yourself. There's plenty of methods to like give you bad luck and take away your good luck, but
Mhm.
there's no, from what I understand, there's no take away your good luck and then give it to me. That seems to be a pretty fascinating thing that I've heard about, but never really dove into it because it's not done over here. At least not to like a public facing type of a thing. It's something that you have to learn
Mhm.
on your own, I guess. Um,
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah, I would also add so to I kind of digressed again, but the the location stuff. So churches, caves are also a nice place to do
Mm,
magic at because caves are traditionally seen as like gates to the underworld,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And it,
Same
and it
here.
has yeah, they have sympathetic links to various different spirits, like the Javoli that I kept mentioning. These are the chthonic goat folk, which are very feared, and
Yes.
people really avoid talking about them. So there are caves, forests. Forests are an absolutely good. Forests are kind of risky, but not just because you can run into some angry crazy person there with an axe or a wild animal or anything. But like in our tradition, there are these spirits called vile, and
Okay.
the best way I can translate them is elves. But when I say elves, I'm not talking about like the little guys. I'm like like little dwarf like Christmas elves.
Sure.
I'm talking about they're almost imagine almost like Tolkien elves, like ethereal, very beautiful. They're exclusively
Okay.
female though. They're
Okay.
almost exclusively female in every story. They appear with usually with white dresses. Sometimes they're naked, but usually with white dresses. There's some folklore that says if Elvila wears a black dress, you're just supposed to get away from that. Just run, do not look back.
Wow.
But even the white dressed ones are very dangerous. So they are these female spirits, tall, ethereal, otherworldly beautiful, and they are ferocious nature guardians. They have like certain spots in the forest that are sacred to them, and if you intrude upon them, it's at the wrong hour of the day
Mm,
or a season, you can get cursed. Um, they are also native to the mountains. They can be found near bodies of water, but
mm.
traditionally people associate them with the forest. But they're kind of widespread for sure. But yeah, so if you go into the forest, you should be mindful of at what time you're entering. You should be very respectful. You should not litter. You should not utter certain things. You should not utter certain names in the forest at certain times because you might invoke their wrath and they might just curse you. But yeah, forests are a very powerful place to work. And if you can also win the favor of these spirits, by the way. They're very, very powerful for healing work, for
Exactly.
healing work, divination and stuff. So Vila are definitely worked with, acted with, and there are several cases of people marrying them. So they become like a shamanic spirit spouse kind of scenario, like the Zmai that I talked about in the beginning.
Right.
But yeah, so forests, mountains, near bodies, like being near a river or a lake, these are also potent places to do magic. But again, you don't pick stuff at random. It's really tailored to what you're doing, what your goal is, what your intent is. So I don't know if you don't just randomly go near a river to do a love spell. It's just you don't really do that.
Right.
So it has to be tailored to what you want. So, for example, if you want to be, if you want to do a working near a body of water, from to my knowledge, weather spells and curses are really these are the two types of workings that you would do there. Crossroads, they're very very flexible. Church, I already mentioned. Forest, pretty flexible, but yeah, it really depends on what you're intending to do.
Okay, cool. Talk to us about some of the tools, some of the physical implements you guys may or may not have.
So, like I mentioned earlier, various talismans that you can make out of goat horns,
Mm-hmm.
skulls. You can make um, you can make things out of like. I guess I don't want to call it a mojo bag, but that's a concept I've seen in hoodoo, and I was like, oh, that's really similar to what we have. But there's like you can get these like goat skin or sheep skin like these like little bags, and you can put like herbs and dirt inside, and you would
Okay.
carry that around, and that can have
Yeah.
like a magical like effect.
Yep.
Um, so these are some of the tools. A broom, like a house broom, can very much be used for magical workings. Um, an axe could be used, like a consecrated axe, for exorcisms, for driving away evil
Would a
spirits.
broom be used to like move negative energy out of a space?
Ah, that's a good observation. Yeah,
Yeah,
it can be. It
that's
can
what
be,
we use
but
it for here.
I've also seen a case of a love spell be like utilizing a broom.
Oh, really? How was that? I mean, if you're allowed to say, how's that done? A love
Yeah,
spell.
so it's a very simple thing where you would like as you sweep. By the way, love spells are typically performed by women here.
Okay,
It's kind of uncommon for men to do it, but men still do it because
sure.
why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? But most of the spells that are passed on love spells are done by women. But basically, this spell, it's very simple. You would like take a broom, and as you're sweeping, and it's supposed to be like a specific specific part of the house. So, for example, a bedroom could be like a good spot, like after two people have had sex. Then the same night, like the next night or the same night, if the person is sleeping, you can take the broom and start sweeping the dust out of the room. And as you're doing that, you would do like a little bialitza, which is again an incantation, and it goes something like, as I sweep this dust, so do I sweep away your thoughts of infidelity or something like that,
Ah,
right? Like
okay. All right.
it's a
Interesting.
yeah, it's a very simple charm. I have not used these kinds of things. I have no experience with love spells from our tradition. I haven't done any love spells, so I can't comment too much on that. But I am aware of certain rites like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for going over that. All right. The next question you kind of already answered about the use of incantations and stuff. So you kind of already went over that. So we can skip that one. You touched on it slightly, but we really haven't talked about this. Trance work, ecstatic states, right? Altered
Mhm.
states of consciousness. Is there a significant role for
Yeah.
that within your
Yes.
system?
Very
Okay.
much so. Very much so. So remember the Vila that I've mentioned earlier?
Yes.
These female elven spirits?
Yep.
They are very famous for trance work. Women would work
Okay.
with them in order to um a common trope in our folklore is that Vila are dancing in a kolo. So they're holding hands together and they're dancing in a circle in the forest. And
Okay.
so women typically women do this, but men can do it too. They would imitate that movement, and they would start spinning until they enter a altered state of consciousness. That's often that's even recorded by a lot of ethnographic studies. You have
Yeah.
saying that women are spinning around and to enter trance. That's one way to do it. Working with spirits directly, like asking them to help you enter a altered state of consciousness, is another way. Very very simple and direct. But you have to be in tune with the spirit. You have to have a good connection with the spirit. You don't want to invite just about any spirit to do that to you. Like,
Exactly.
obviously, it has to be somebody you have a pact with. So there are a lot of um, there are a lot of there are a lot of rituals and spells that rely on you exiting your body. So spirit flight is a very important like it's a very important how do you put it? It's a method. It's a very
Okay.
important method in our tradition.
Okay.
So what people can do, they can use certain herbs to facilitate them, exiting their body, or they can take like animal pelts, and they would wear animal pelts. Yeah,
Oh,
like
I
remember
think I know what you're talking about.
remember the
Yes.
the Vukodlak thing that I mentioned, the werewolf thing.
Yes.
If you have a consecrated wolf pelt, you can wear this, and as you're entering the trance state, through whichever method that you've been thought of, or that you intuitively arrive at, and you exit the body while wearing that, you would have the qualities of the wolf, and then you can go out and do a lot of nasty stuff if you so choose. The wolf is associated, for example, there's a lot of folklore about the wolf carrying your ancestors in their jaws.
Oh
So like
wow.
you
Okay.
can you can eat people's spirits if you're strong enough, right? And if their
Okay.
spirits are weak enough, you can take their spirits, you can take their blessings, you can take their luck, you can give them diseases, you can
Sheesh.
like rape. You can do a lot of stuff. There's some you've heard about the evil eye, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
What do you make of it?
I do believe it's real. I do
Mhm.
think it's quite simple for people to do it. I don't think it takes much to put an evil eye on someone. I think people do it often unwittingly. Non
Yeah.
practitioners, that is, do it. Well, I guess even sometimes practitioners. So yeah, I don't have a problem with the evil eye.
Right, the evil eye in our tradition, and also in the Greek one, in the Greek folk tradition, is very common, and it does touch on trance work. Like if you're you would some people would like recite this whole litany of ills you wish upon the other person. You're concentrating, and then from the left eye you would like expel, and then you would either bump into the person or give them a fake compliment. And as they're accepting the compliment, so do they
Oh
accept your malice. That's a common method here, and it,
yeah.
it and it and it really, like, again, it touches on trance states. Like it works best if, number one, you have a strong pact with a spirit who has taught you how to do this. You can do it without a pact, of course. But if a spirit has passed on their own version of the evil eye to you, now you're drawing the power not just from that spirit and yourself, but you're drawing from the pact that you have with this being. It's just like the sort of custom tailored ritual, if you will. And when you enter a altered state of consciousness, even a light state of trance, then you can like successfully expel that malice onto somebody and curse them.
Yeah.
Um, I have experimented with this, and it is effective, and it can be really funny to cause certain effects on people that annoy you in your day-to-day life. Um, but yeah, like the trance state is very very important. Also, it's really important for divination.
That
Like
was going to be my next question. Divination.
yeah. Yeah, so do you want to ask the question, or do you want me to keep yapping about the
No, please, yeah,
true?
go. I was just gonna say, like,
Okay.
tell me about some of your divinatory practices, right? I know over here we have tarot. I use OWAM. Well, I don't really read OWAM anymore, but I used to know how to read OWAM, cowrie shells, geomancy, things like that. What do they
Right.
have over on your side?
So we have a bunch of stuff. We have scrying, we have augury, we have favomancy, cartomancy. Like I love favomancy. I love, like, you take 41 seeds, bean seeds,
Okay.
and you divine with them. And there are like many ways you can. you can do this. I use a method called Kumalak,
Okay.
which people can find it online. It is a very intuitive method. It has been likened to geomancy by certain scholars.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I really like that. I am not a fan of card readings. I've tried it, not really my thing. I think it's very important for a person to find what method they have the most affinity for.
Sure.
Um, and for me, the beans are the way to go. And I always, when I tell people, oh yeah, I know how to look into the beans, because that's how we say it. We don't say, we don't really use the word divination in Serbian. We just say we're looking into the beans, right? So every time I say that, people just kind of like, oh, that's cute. But it is
Interesting.
it is a very potent divination method. It sounds silly,
No.
but yeah, out
So
of all the
is it when
huh?
so you said that there's 41 beans. Is it something like you take the beans and I guess you toss them out or throw them out and wherever they land that pattern means a certain thing?
Nope, I can tell you the Kumalak method right now.
Okay, yeah, please.
So okay, so from like the most convenient way you could do it, you get a notepad and you draw a 3 by 3 square, right?
Okay.
You do that. So you take your beans and you're supposed to firstly enter a light state of trance. We go back to the trance thing. Like
Sure.
so every divination method requires some degree of trance for it to work optimally. I know this from experience. So
As you
once
should.
you once you're in the zone, right? What you can do is you can invite one of your spirits that you wish to divine with and ask them to blow into the beans. Now, what I do is I take all 41 seeds into my right hand and I put it out and I ask the spirit to blow into the beans. And when I would feel literal physical wind and I would actually feel physical stuff on the bean. Like I would actually feel like a breath being like a cold wind being poured into my hand,
Okay.
which doesn't come. It doesn't come from the window or anything. Like it comes from the opposite direction. Like the old windows are closed. It's
Right.
definitely the spirit. It's just so unambiguous. You know that it's the spirit for sure.
Exactly.
So once I feel that, I then put all the seeds on the table, and then I would ask the question. I would focus on the question, and I would shuffle the beans, all 41 seeds. I would shuffle them, and then at a random point, when I feel this right, I would split them into 3 piles, right? Then from the first pile, I would remove four seeds, and then another four, and another four until I'm left with either four, three, two, or one. Whatever remains, I would put that in one of the squares, right?
Okay.
Then I do the same with the second pile. Then whatever remains, I put in the second square, and the third. And then I don't touch the remaining, the ones that I put in the squares. I don't touch them. I
Okay.
take all the beans again. I shuffle them. I split them into three again. Then I do the same. And then whatever remains from the pile number one, two, and three go into the second row. First box, second box, third box in the second row. Then I do the same for the third row, and then once I fill the grid, right? Then I
Okay.
interpret. I don't these beans that are left. I don't touch them. They're not. There's an additional method you can do with them, but I don't. It's not necessary most of the time. So you just leave them alone. So now you look at the square. Now you look at the 3 by 3 square and the beans that you have, the numbers that you have, in those squares, and then you interpret. The first row refers to the past, but also the matters of the mind. The
Okay.
first square, the first square symbolizes the eye, right? The second box in the first row is the head, and the third is the eye again. So you have two eyes and a head.
Okay.
The second row is about the present, but also something in relation to actions, emotion,
Okay.
current matter, current dealings, and also material possession. Why? Because the first box in the second row is the hand, the second is the heart, and the third is the hand. So you have two
Okay.
hands and a heart. And the third row is the future, but also like the path, like your journey, right? And
Okay.
the first box in the third row is the leg, the second is the horse, and the third is the leg again. And now the way you interpret this is so if you have one bean seed, it corresponds to fire, two corresponds to water, three to air, and four to earth.
Okay.
and then you interpret it very intuitively. So, like for example, if you have um, Earth in an eye, like 4 in the first square, so you have Earth in the eye. What can that symbolically mean? Well, some kind of blindness, perhaps. But you would always like look at it contextually. You wouldn't like look at everything. You wouldn't isolate any particulars. You have to look everything in context, and you have to rely on connecting yourself with the spirit of the beings as well as the spirit that you're divining with.
Right.
So you're doing this in harmony, and it's super intuitive. Like for example, you can have something like um, in the first, like if you look at the second row, for example, you have, let's say, 413, right? It could mean that this person had a lot of money, but their heart is fiery because one in the heart box. Their heart is fiery, so they're impulsive, and maybe they're like excessively spending stuff. So you have air in the other hand, which is an empty hand. So
Mm.
it can denote like a loss of resources. It's super like there are no hard rules. It's just super intuitive, and it works on like you have to connect with the spirits, but it also you have to understand like these associations will definitely come to mind as you're doing things. Yeah.
Awesome.
Did I
Yeah,
explain it
yeah.
well?
Yes, that
Okay.
was great. That was great. I'm sure we'll have a lot of
Thank you.
comments on that. I'm sure people will be pausing and taking notes for that because divination seems to be really popular these days with newer practitioners and things like that. So thank you. That was fascinating.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, one quick detail I forgot
sure.
to mention. Some people, so there's a kind of a regional variance here. Some people like to read Kumala from left to right, others from right to left. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Whichever method, whichever whatever is most convenient to you, you can do that. I do it from left to right. But yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. We are running up on time here, so let me change around some of these questions here. Okay. Here's an interesting one. Protection, wards,
Mhm.
shields, that sort of thing. Protecting oneself, protecting one's home, protecting one's place of business if they own their own business or work in an office with just themselves and a couple other people. Um, is that an important practice within Serbian folk magic?
Yep. Yep. Very much so. Um, it can be very simple, honestly. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be. Because keep in mind, Balkan folk magic is it's the magic of the poor people, generally speaking.
Sure. Yeah.
Like it's people use what they have on hand, to elevate their own position in life and hopefully get out of that kind of circumstance. So a
Same.
lot of the rituals are going to rely on very simple stuff. But as you're gaining more resources, you're going to learn more from your spirits.
Right.
So very simple ways of protection could be the use of garlic, especially if you could hang garlic above a threshold that because garlic is a protective plant.
Mm,
So you would like you would do that. Horseshoe, for example, a consecrated horseshoe can be very very potent.
yes.
And
I have one
not
above my door.
yeah yeah there are very interesting spirits here. They're connected with Saint Theodore,
Okay.
and the horsemen, which I can talk about a little later. But to answer your question more succinctly, you can consecrate a horseshoe with Saint Theodore or one of the Todorci, which are the dark horsemen, which are really badass spirits, by the way. They're really cool. A lot of Serbians seem to think that Tolkien borrowed that he took inspiration from the Todorci for his Nazgul, because Todorci in our folklore are like one-to-one described as Nazgul. Like you don't see their faces, these like hooded, cloaked, like swordsmen on horses, but they're kind of weirdly fused with their horses too. Yeah, but anyway, you can petition one of them to consecrate a horseshoe,
Okay.
or Saint Theodore, who is connected with them, and you can hang that somewhere. That can also be like a powerful protective ward. Icons, honestly, a lot of Orthodox icons. You will see a lot of like some people who are particularly superstitious. They will hang icons practically everywhere, and that can be a very that can a decent way to protect your home as well. And you would of course pray to the saints as well when you feel is right. Ancestors, you asked me about that earlier. If you're
Mm-hmm.
working with the ancestors, you can also you know like give them water regularly and ask them to protect the home and stuff. There is a concept here called Zmija Čuvarkuća, which is a house guardian snake. And
Okay, interesting. Okay.
yeah, and so scholars kind of go back and forth on this. I am not really sure. Like I was like, for example, our famous folklorist Vasilij Draconovich, he is of the opinion that that the snake is like an animal form of an ancestor who is watching over somebody. Other
Okay.
people would just sort of say, no, it's not really an ancestor. It's straight up just a snake. Just it's a snake spirit
Right.
that has taken on physical form or is dwelling in the house in a non-physical form. So, establishing a relationship with the Smijočork, which can be a way to protect your home as well. If you don't have one, there is a way that to obtain protector spirit snake spirits. So you can under your floorboards you can put snake bones. You can put like especially if you have an intact bone, like an intact skeleton rather of a snake, you can put that under your floorboards in a specific place.
Okay.
Better if it's better if a corner of a house, which you will not disturb. Um, and you can then do prayers, and you can invite us. You know, if you don't have, you know, you can invite the serpent spirit there, and you can feed it regularly to protect your home. That's another way to do it.
Okay.
Axes. Some people use an axe as a protection, slash exorcism tool slash whatever. Um, they can hang an axe somewhere, you know, and use that as like a consecrated axe. They can use that as a protective thing. Um, yeah. And you know, if you want to get more complex stuff, you would make amulets that your spirits teach you, right? That you would put around the house, in corners of the house. Um, and you would maintain those wards, I guess. You know, by like lighting incense, and then you take the amulet and you hover it above the incense, and you
Yeah.
like recharge the amulets, as it were, right? And praying over them.
Excellent. Excellent. Awesome. Yeah, there's it's crazy the correlations from east to west. We
Mhm.
also during the ancestor veneration rituals use water. That's the main sort of component outside of the ancestor altar itself. Water is used and changed out. Some might do it daily, but I do mine weekly for the ancestors. They seem to manifest best around water, and so that's certainly something that we use as well. Um, all right, here in the West, there's a I don't want to call it an emphasis, but a lot of people like to, I guess, specialize in one sort of form of magic, right? We've got people who are just healers, right? People who only do necromancy and they only, work with the dead. There's people who, only, work with angels or claim to. Are there any sort of specialties or specialists in your system? Just, healers, curse lifters, diviners? Or is it just like everyone is a jack of all trades, no real master of none, or
There is
master of all?
yeah, like maybe it's a little incoherent from an outsider's point of view, because people on one hand they're like, well, there's no such thing as like you know, magic is magic.
Mm,
Um, although of course exceptions exist, some people will have opinions about that, but
sure.
it's usually not the practitioners who have those opinions. But then on the other hand, you're gonna have people who literally just, I'm gonna just do healing
Right.
and divination, and that's it. So when people say going to a vrachara, it would usually entail somebody who is a curse breaker, healer, and diviner. They typically they don't dish out curses normally. But again, people do what people do, and so there are exceptions. But it's not uncommon for people to specialize in one to two, three types of magic, right?
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Awesome.
They're like yeah, they're like people who have like a, if they have a particular pact with a Vila, for example, because Vila, like I mentioned, they are, even though they're very ferocious spirits, they're also very good healers. They're renowned for their healing abilities. So somebody who has a pact with them might not engage in malefic work on purpose.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. All right. I think we got time for maybe one more question here. So, we're gonna take it back to or take it back for beginners. If someone completely new to Serbian folk magic, Balkan witchcraft, your specific tradition, if someone was new to it, what would be the most important thing you'd want them to understand about the system?
Uh, Everything is basically alive, and spirits hear you when you call. They have their own will, they have their own agendas. Serbian, well, Balkan folk magic in general, it's very primal in a way, right? Like you're
Okay.
not gonna that you don't have these like cuddly, all loving spirits. You have to understand that spirits have their benevolent side and they have their darker side. You know, uh, Even the trees. And by the way, this is a thing that I wanted to touch on real quick. Um,
Okay.
the trees are very important here. So different trees have different occult properties, and it also depends on at what time of the day you approach them. So you have like two schools of thought. You have one school of thought that says, okay, you have like daytime and nighttime distinction. So at daytime, the more beneficent qualities are, emphasized. And when you're harvesting a plant or approaching a tree at night, you're going to be interacting more with their chthonic darker side. So getting familiar with trees and herbs is a very good way because you can there are spirits uh, connected with certain trees, and they can protect you, right? Like a beginner, for example, approaching an oak or a walnut or a pear. Walnut and pear are like the cursed trees. They're the
Ah,
darker
okay.
trees. Yeah, you asked me earlier about like what certain spells would look like. Here's an example of a curse, for instance.
Okay.
You would baptize a an effigy in the image of the person you wish to curse. You would molded the clay with the dirt of somebody who died miserably or a violent death. You would do certain prayers. You would drive nails into them. You can poke 41 holes into them, and that has like a mythological correspondence here. 41 holes, and you can like stuff them with tobacco and or peppers or like some violent stuff. And then you can if you're doing this at nighttime, which you should be, you take this to a walnut tree and
Mm-hmm.
you knock 3 times on it. You knock 3 times, and you would request the tree to devour your target. And you would like dig a little hole near the roots, and you would bury the effigy there. You would do a prayer, and you would ask the walnut tree to send forth its most malicious vampires, witches, and devils, and all the spirits associated with it, to devour your target. And then you would bury the effigy and pour an offering of strong liquor to the walnut tree. So and these are very potent. It sounds very simple, but it's very potent.
Oh
Like
yeah.
trees in our mythology have sympathetic links and connections. They're not just alive on their own. They also have like connections with other spirits. So like I
Yes.
mentioned, walnuts have connections with these like dead witches, vampires, these hungry dead devils. The
Mm-hmm.
pear tree is very strongly associated with the master wolves, with devils and with the vila, right? So a pear tree can also be petitioned to harm somebody. So a
Ah.
beginner would start a relationship with a tree. It sounds simple, it sounds silly,
Yeah.
but through developing a relationship with a walnut or a pear or an elder or oak, for example, or ash tree, you can by exploring that connection, you can get into contact with other spirits who would come to your aid because of your connection with the tree. And the spirit of the tree itself would also help you. The tree can help you they can help you lift curses, they can
Nice.
hide your magic. Trees can be petitioned to hide your magic, which is especially useful in graveyard work if you manage to find a tree in the graveyard near the grave that you're dealing with. You can do lots of stuff. So getting familiar with your local like trees and herbs that are around you is a good place to start. Observing nature, see what's around you. You can find you can find really good allies just outside of your house. You just have to suspend your view that it's just a tree or that the world is dead. You have to accept that everything is alive, everything has a spirit, and everything has connections to other spirits. These things work in harmony, in some kind of unison, right?
Right.
Um, So, getting familiar with the trees is one way to do it. Picking up a divination method is always good.
Yep.
Beans, like I said, my observation is that it is much easier to get better results with divination when you're using organic matter. I don't know why that is, or if it's just
Okay.
me, but for some reason, like it's easier to generate more accurate answers through, let's say, beans than with cards. With cards, you need to connect a little more. You need a more of an oomph. But like it's sort of maybe it's just me, but again, that's something I've noticed. So, picking a divination method, practicing seership is very important. That's a really big thing here, especially if you're not somebody, um, especially if you're, I mean, even gifted people have to practice. Everybody has to practice. But like, even if, like, when you're starting out, you can start with your ancestors. This is what people in the villages often say. If you don't have any inherited pacts, if you don't have any spirits who has approached you, you can start with your ancestors. They're the most, you can request for an ancestor spirit who is benevolently disposed towards you and who is magically inclined. That's always a plus. You could practice with them. You can practice your seership with them. You can talk to them, give them offerings regularly. The more you're exposed to spiritual stimuli, the more your spiritual senses ramp up. I've seen a lot of like exercises on the internet, like, oh, do this for psychic senses, visualize this, visualize that. I have never found that to be effective myself. I've always found that being exposed to spiritual phenomena is what improves your senses. So a spirit talking to you, spirit trying to send you a vision, a spirit, something actively from the other side trying to influence you will have influence.
Exactly.
So yeah, so that's a yeah. So in summary, ancestor spirits if you have nobody. But then I suppose if you're a Westerner and you don't have an ancestor who is from the Balkans, there are other ways to get in touch with our spirits. But getting familiar with the trees in your area, knowing what they do, knowing their occult properties, approaching them at the right time of the day, picking up divination, practicing seership. These things are, I think, basic, almost universal. I would say, not just limited to Balkan magic.
Well, fantastic. That was great. Thank you very much. I learned a lot. This was awesome. And if you're open to it, I'd like to have you come back and maybe continue this conversation and even dive into some other things. Maybe get your thoughts on some of the things happening in our spiritual world today. But I hope you enjoyed this because I certainly have. This was enlightening. It was eye opening, and I'm sure the audience will feel the same.
I very much enjoy the conversation. Thank you for having me on. I really love discussing our tradition, especially when I hear similarities in other systems. It's always cool to see these correspondences. Um,
Agreed.
yeah, and I think I hope my answers were somewhat succinct because I have a habit of
Yeah.
going all over the place. But yeah, I would be
I'm the
definitely
same
down.
way. My audience is used to it. I can take something that is a 5 minute topic and turn it into a 2 hour video. I do it every week, so my audience is 100% on board with that line of thinking. So please don't feel bad or anything.
Okay,
It was great.
okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely down to come on another time as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Sorry, my dog at the end. My dog now decides to start barking at the very
It
end.
it
Sorry.
it's your familiar calling out to
I,
you.
exactly. Yep. See, there he is. Definitely familiar. Brooklyn, please stop. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I certainly appreciate it. I will message you, and we can set something up for the future.
Yep.
Guys, be sure to like and subscribe. Share this out with your friends, and I'll catch you all in the next one. As always, seek the mysteries. Peace.